Hola, hola, amigas. Welcome to another episode of Modern Latina in Midlife. Today, I have a special guest. Jennifer Arthurton is joining us today to talk about why midlife is actually the most powerful point in your life. And I loved our conversation. Jennifer Arthurton is the founder and creator of Old Chicks Know Shit, a community and a podcast designed to inspire and support midlife women in chasing their dreams and creating their kick ass next chapter. Jennifer is a former Fortune 500 marketing executive turned midlife mentor, podcast host, writer, and speaker. Having survived her own midlife crisis and subsequent course correction, let's welcome Jennifer. Welcome to the podcast, Jennifer. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yes, awesome. Well, today we're going to talk about why midlife is the most powerful point in your life. But before we get into that, I'd like it if you could share with us a little bit about your story and how you landed in this place of being passionate about reframing the narrative around women in midlife.
Yeah. In the year leading up to my 50th birthday, I found myself divorced, unemployed, an empty nester, and I was also bedridden with a stress related illness.
Mm,
And so it was as though all of the identities that I had in the world were literally stripped away from me. And the scary part was I had no idea who I was. If I wasn't a wife, mother, corporate executive, and at the time I was like a huge gym goer, if I wasn't doing those things, who was I? And I had no answer to that question. I literally didn't know who I was.
mhm,
And I truly believed that, my life was over. I was faced with this daunting task of having to reinvent my life at the age of 50. And the social narrative, the cultural narrative around what it means to be a 50-year-old woman is not exactly uplifting. Let's put it this way, right?
absolutely. I hear you.
It's, the narrative is about riding off into the retirement sunset with a pot of gold under your arm on the arm of a handsome man. And I'm like, yep, none of that is my reality. So
Yep.
if
Check,
it's
check,
not
check. No.
that, yeah, exactly. So if it's
Yeah.
not that, what is it? Like, and I could see no possibility for the rest of my life, right?
Mhm,
Because I was like, nobody starts over at 50. Like, this is the beginning of the end. And I had that narrative in my head. And then after throwing myself a big old pity party for a long time,
mhm.
I finally realized one day that I have 30 years or maybe longer ahead of me. Like, this is, in fact, the longest chapter of my life yet. And am I really going to just like sit around and like coast into the finish line or, wait for grandkids to come visit or,
Yeah.
all of that stuff? And I'm like, this sounds really absurd. Like, I'm young, I'm vibrant, like, and feel like I have a lot left to get to do. And so that was the reason why I started Old Chicks Know Shit, because I was looking for inspiration about what's next.
Mhm,
Like, where are
mhm,
all the amazing 50, 60, 7-year-old women doing incredible things in the world? And I had to search really hard to find them. And
mhm,
so, when I did, I was like, okay, we need to hear more about this, because the cultural narrative
mhm,
would have you believe it's all bladder leakage protection, meal
mhm,
replacement shakes, and like waiting for your
mhm.
grandkids to visit.
Right.
And all of that is lovely and valuable, but it tells a tiny fraction of the story of what it means to be a woman in your 50s and 60s.
Yeah.
And as I started having conversations with other women, I realized that I wasn't alone in the way that I was
Mhm.
feeling.
But
So,
nobody's
yeah,
talking about it,
yeah. Well,
right?
and that's exactly it. Nobody was talking about it.
Right.
Yeah.
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 Your story sounds very similar to mine, almost to
Yeah.
the dot. Yeah,
I know.
very similar. And, I was the one that started voicing with my friends, like, hey, like, this is happening and this is happening. And they're like, oh, yeah. And I'm like, why are we surprised? It's like,
Right.
we
Yeah.
shouldn't be surprised. Like, we should get to this stage a little bit better prepared. So thank you. Thank you for sharing your story.
No problem.
So in your opinion, why is midlife then often portrayed as challenging or this negative stage in life, like particularly for women? Like what is it that started? Do you in your opinion?
Oh, I have a lot to say about this topic. We could probably go on for a really long time. Honestly, though, I think women are cultured to see their value in their bodies, like what they look like.
Mhm.
Is it physically pleasing to somebody outside of myself? What we do for other people. So taking care of everybody, our kids, our families, and then our ability to have children. Right. And so we reach a time of life where we're no longer able to have kids. Maybe our kids are leaving home, or at least their demands on us are much less. And
Mhm.
our physical body is shifting and changing. We're getting gray hair, maybe a few extra pounds, some extra wrinkles. And so when we see our value in those things, like what we do for others, our body, and our ability to have children, and all of that shifts, we start questioning, like, where do we fit in? Like, where do we belong now?
Mhm.
And the reality is that we are not our bodies. We are not, baby
Mhm.
machines. We are, vibrant women with tons of knowledge and wisdom and experience to share. And
Mhm.
that's where we need to be refocusing at this time of our lives. If
Mhm.
we spend our time trying to not look our age or trying to fight the aging process, which is a losing battle, it's aging is
Right.
happening to all of us every day. We're actually wasting our energy when we could be refocusing it on things that matter to us. What are our passions? What brings us joy? What's the legacy that we would like to leave? And
Mhm.
that's where we need to be refocusing our attention. And that's why I talk about this all the time, because I just see so many. I mean, there is a $60 billion anti-aging industry
Mhm.
that's keeping us focused on the wrong things,
Mhm. Yeah,
right? Like, aging
absolutely.
happens. And I'm not saying don't take care of yourself. Like, if you, work out, or, you want to do plastic surgery, or, dye your hair, or whatever it is, absolutely. Everybody should be able to do whatever they want to do. But
Mhm.
that should not be the sole focus
Mhm.
of where we are at this time of our lives. We're missing an opportunity if that's our focus.
Yeah, 100%. And we're living much longer, and we're also much more vibrant, much longer than like
Yes.
the previous generations were. And that's the way I see it. When I reached 50, I was like, I don't think that I look or act like my mother did when she
Right.
was 50. You know,
Yeah.
I feel like I have so much more and I can do so much more. Like how is it possible that I'm gonna sit here and just, not that there's anything wrong with it, but like just look forward to the grandkids coming home. You know, my kids aren't
Right.
even like
Right.
nowhere thinking about grandkids right now, and I don't want to either. So
Right.
it's
Exactly.
like
Me
in the
either.
meantime, what do I do? Like there's so much more. So segueing into that, what sparked your interest in exploring the concept that midlife was the most powerful point in your life as opposed to any other point?
Yeah. I mean, for me, and I see this, with the women in my community, and, the clients that I work with, there is a sense of freedom that comes with this time of our lives, right? So we're not, consumed with building our careers and raising our families, like all of that is done.
Mhm.
Our careers are on autopilot. Our kids need us less, or they've even left home, right? And so we're freeing up, like, time, precious resources, like time and energy, right? And it's a question of now, where do we want to redirect that time and energy?
Mm.
But it really is an opportunity for us to stop focusing on all of the things outside of us, and to start refocusing our energy towards ourselves. Like, what do we want? What makes us happy? What are the passions that we want to follow in this time of our lives? And it really is, I call it an
Mhm.
unlearning of everything that we've been taught about what it means to be a woman from the time, we hit grade school, really,
Mhm. Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
To now, owning the sense of who we are and all that we've accomplished at this
Mhm.
time of our lives.
Mhm.
So
Awesome.
it really is, an opportunity for us to just start, like I said, turning the tables and
Mhm.
refocusing on ourselves.
Mhm. I know you work with women. Do you find that oftentimes when women get to this stage, maybe they I mean, you kind of touched on it a little bit, like what am I doing? Who am I? Like, do you find
Yeah.
that many women are lost? Like they don't even know who they were because they chose to get married very young. They had the kids and they chose a career at a very young age, maybe potentially because their parents kind of, you know,
Oh, yeah.
push them in kind of that direction. Do you find that a lot of women at our age are kind of maybe like rediscovering who they are, or maybe like making
Absolutely.
shifts, like even career wise?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for some of us, it's rediscovering and who we are. And for me, in my case, it was discovering who I was in the first place.
Hmm.
Because, again, we're handed the checklist, like the rules really early on. And I
Hmm.
thought I was doing everything right. So, go to school, get good grades, get into a good college, get a job, work your way up the ranks, and somewhere in there, get married, have a family, and keep going. And there was this all like in the last like maybe 5 years of my career, there would be this like little niggling voice that would come up every once in a while. And it would be like, is this it? Is this really my life? Is this really what
Hmm.
I've worked so hard for? Is this where I even want to be? And then I
Hmm.
would shut it down, right? I'd be like, okay, I got a
Hmm.
job to do. And and I would do that because I didn't know what to do about this voice. I had invested so much to get to where I was, right? And
Hmm.
it also meant
Hmm.
making a change, and I that was so unbelievably scary, right? Like,
Right.
how do I leave this? Where do I even go? And as women, in the process of all of this, we've become so disconnected from ourselves. We're
Hmm.
just going through the motions of
Yep.
serving our careers and everybody else. And us and the things that we want fall to the very, very bottom
Yeah.
of our to-do list, the part like where the dust and the tumbleweed is, the part you
Hmm.
ever get to.
Right. Right.
So we get
Exactly.
to this stage of life, and all of a sudden everything is shifting, and then we're looking at
Hmm.
ourselves going, how did I get here?
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
and I realized that along the way I never ever checked in with myself to say, hey, is this making you happy? Is this what you want to be doing?
Hmm. Hmm.
It didn't even occur to me that that was an
Yeah.
option.
And sometimes when we do, for me, it was like, yeah, but how is this going to affect the kids? And how is this, it's like it
Yeah,
was always putting everybody else as a priority. It's like, "Oh, I can't do this now. I
yeah,
can't do that. Like, it was always the like, take care of me last. It was always the kids that got
exactly.
the clothes first. It was always the kids that got like, the best portion of the
Yeah.
meals. It's like,
Well,
it was,
exactly, right? We put ourselves last. And the women who end up in my community, or the women who end up as my clients, they come to me saying, I know I want something different, but I have no idea
mhm.
what it is or how to get there.
Mhm. Yeah, 100%. And then another thing that you mentioned is you get handed this checklist, right? Of get married, get the career, all the things, and that checklist stops at have the kids, the house, and the husband, and then
Yes.
and that's where that checklist stops. And after that, it's like, okay, then what? And I don't know about you, but my mom never told me about it or any of the changes that were happening. And when I
No,
asked her, she was like, I can't remember. It was uneventful. Like, I'm like, what do you mean perimenopause was uneventful? Like,
I know. I had a client tell me that her mother told her that menopause was literally a day and that was it. Like it just happened one day and that
are
was the
you
end of that.
are you kidding me? My heart just stopped a little bit. I was
I
like,
know.
that's
Well,
crazy.
and that's exactly it, right? Like we're so disconnected from ourselves that even the fact that like our mothers and we are not the women of our mothers and
Mhm,
grandmothers generation. First of all,
mhm,
we have so much more opportunity than they did,
mhm,
right? And the women of our generation are actually leading the charge now for the generations coming
mhm,
behind us because
mhm.
like my daughter has even said to me like, I can't wait till my next chapter to see what I'm going to
It's
be doing.
awesome.
And for me, I'm like, I didn't even know there was a next chapter. It was kind of
I
some
love
big
that.
blurry thing of retirement, but I never actually thought about what that was.
Mhm,
And I think that is a huge part of the problem is because it ends when the kids leave home. And then
mhm,
there's what I call the midlife abyss, where we're looking at the
mhm,
rest of our lives and we just see this big black hole in front of us.
mhm. Yeah,
And then we're like, okay, well, where do I go from here? What do I
right.
want? Who am I?
Yeah, and even in retirement, it's like, well, what do I do with myself? Because like I saw when my parents reached retirement, they were just like, okay, now what? What do we do? We're just staring at each other. Like the day went by and all we did was pick up the trash. Just
Right.
like, I'm like, oh my God, this is
Right.
awful.
Well, I mean, the fact that we can have, a second chapter, a second career,
Mhm,
or even a third one, right? Like, or maybe even a fourth one. Like, we get to decide how we want to
mhm,
spend this time.
mhm,
But like, when you look at kind of the archetypal view of a woman's life, it's like maiden, right? Pretty self-explanatory, mother,
mhm.
and then it goes to crone. And every time I read the archetype of crone, I'm like, okay, it's an 80-year-old woman sitting on a mountaintop spouting wisdom before she leaves the earth. And then I'm like, okay, well, what about the chunk of time
The in
between when your kids
between.
leave home and you
There's an
become
in
this
between chunk
right? And it's
that's
a huge
missing.
chunk. And we are like, we have all of the knowledge and wisdom and experience. We're powerful, we're capable. Are we
Mhm.
literally just sitting around doing nothing until we're
Mhm.
spouting wisdom before we leave the planet? I'm like, how absurd. Like,
Yeah,
how absurd of it.
absolutely.
And so I've termed that kind of chapter in between the maven years. Because if
Mhm.
you look at the dictionary
Mhm.
definition of the word maven,
I
it
like
means an
that.
expert with knowledge and wisdom to share.
Ooh, I
And we
love
are
that.
young enough to be able to share this knowledge and this wisdom, but old enough to be able to share the knowledge and wisdom, and young enough to see the effects of sharing that,
Mhm.
right? Like, we're not just
Mhm.
going to drop it and then
Mhm. And then leave.
right. Right. And so
Yeah, that's
that in itself makes this a very, very powerful time in our
I
lives because we
love
can affect
that.
huge change.
I really, really love that, the way you've put that and the way I mean, I think instinctively I knew that, but you putting words to it is really, really powerful. Thank you for sharing that.
No
Um,
problem.
have you had any experience? I kind of put this question together and I don't know if if you have any experience with this, but in this midlife stage, do you have any experience with the intersection with other identities, such as like race or sexuality or socioeconomic status? Do you see maybe any differences or, within those identities and midlife?
Yeah, it's interesting because midlife really is the intersection of a whole pile of things, right? So there's ageism, there's sexism, and then depending upon what other, population that you identify with, there's all these other things layered on top of it. And if white middle class women are underutilized and undervalued, then that is exponentially worse for Black women, for Latina women, for
Mhm.
queer, transgendered, like all of the other categories.
Mhm.
And so I think it behooves us, in the conversations that we're having to include those
Mhm.
populations.
Mhm.
I try and do that. I know I still have
Mhm.
work to do on that,
Mhm.
but
Me too.
their experience, like Black women's experience of menopause, for example, is very different than the way white women experience it.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
then again, transgendered, queer, like all of that, like there's lots that's not talked about.
Mhm.
And hopefully by opening up that conversation, we can start getting to the root of these
Mhm.
experiences and how do we support that.
Yeah, that's really important. Yeah, I need to do a better job at it as well, in using language that is more inclusive. In my mind, I feel like I
Yeah,
am, but I'm
me too.
still learning that. So
Yeah.
okay. Okay. So could you discuss some strategies or approaches that women can use to embrace the midlife years and tap into their power during this period? Or maybe this is something that you do within your community and in the programs that you
Mm.
offer?
Yeah, no, I mean, that absolutely, that's what I do when I work with my one-on-one clients, um, and in the community. The first job that I do with every woman is about getting her to reconnect back to herself,
Mhm.
right? Like to her physical self, to her body, right? But also to, you know, the voice inside her. Because as
Mhm.
we talked about, we're so busy doing, 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 doing that little voice inside us, like that intuitive part of us, we've pushed down for so long
Mhm.
that it stops speaking to us.
Mhm.
And this chapter of our lives is really led by intuition. Like the
Mhm.
answers to the questions that we have do not reside outside of us, they are
Yeah.
inside of us.
Yeah.
And our job at
100%.
this time is to connect back in and to hear
Mhm.
that voice. Like, where is it guiding us?
Mhm.
Whether you call it the soul voice or the intuition or whatever that is.
Mhm. And so when you say you reconnect women to back to themselves, to their bodies, how do you do that? Is it like grounding meditation? Like, are there certain practices that you take them through?
Yeah. And I mean, what works for everybody is very different.
Mhm.
But the very, very first thing I say is to spend time with yourself in silence, solitude, and stillness.
Mhm.
Whether that is meditation, whether if you could do 5 minutes of meditation or 20 minutes of meditation or whatever that looks like. Maybe for some women, all that's accessible is sitting with your coffee for 10 minutes before the house wakes up in complete silence, no phone,
Mhm.
no music, no nothing, right?
Mhm.
For other women, it might be connecting with nature.
Mhm.
And it's finding that thing that will quiet that what I call the monkey mind, will
Mhm.
quiet the monkey mind long enough that you can start to hear your own inner voice.
Mhm.
So for me, I mean, like I had considered myself an abject failure at meditation. I tried it many times before in my life, but I literally couldn't shut my brain off.
Mhm.
And what happened for me in terms of like my midlife crisis, and I'm putting it in air quotes because it
Mm.
wasn't really a crisis. It
Right.
was for me. Now I look back on it and I'm like, it was a huge gift. But I was forced into a place of stillness and silence. Right? I literally couldn't get out of bed to do anything. Right? And that the only thing I could do was to listen to kind of that voice inside. So I would sometimes what I would do is walk across the street to the park that was across from my house, and I would sit on the grass under a tree and like just sit there and see what came up. I encourage all women to grab a journal and just write. Like
Mhm.
you could answer questions like, how do I feel today? What do I need? What would make me happy right now? And just like ask those questions. It's like building a relationship like you would with anybody else. You know, you need to spend time with them, ask them some
Mhm.
questions and start listening to their answers. And then you're like, oh, okay,
Mhm.
now we're building a relationship. And so,
Yeah.
really, it is about rebuilding that relationship with
Mhm.
ourselves in whatever way makes
Mhm.
sense. But silence, stillness, and solitude
Mhm.
are three kind of key ingredients that
Mhm.
we just need to, because again, we've been so busy doing it. You know how
Mhm.
many women I talk to who don't even stop during the day? Like, what did you do for yourself today? Well, I didn't have time, right? I
Mhm.
didn't do anything. And that goes on for weeks and months and years,
Yeah. Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I call it dating yourself, it's
Yeah,
like take yourself out on a date, whatever that looks like. Go
exactly.
on a picnic, go to the beach, go, just go to dinner by yourself. It's
Yeah.
like, I mean, it seems shocking to people. I do it all the time, but I love it. I have found I love my company, my own
Yeah.
company. I like being with myself, and I enjoy the conversations that my intuition has, with me now. So
Yeah. Oh,
that's a
yeah.
very good
It's
point.
our intuition is so ridiculously powerful, right? And connecting back to that is probably
Mhm.
one of the most important things I
Mhm.
think that we can do at this time of life.
Mhm. So how do you I know that in stillness and in journaling you can start kind of to pull out these questions. Is that usually how you get people to connect to their intuition, or how do you get them to hear their intuition? Because I feel like a lot of people just never quite get that.
Yeah. And one of the things I always say too is to start small.
Mhm.
Like, do I want an apple or an orange? And what's
Mhm.
the answer that comes up? And trust that. Just go with that.
Interested. Yes, don't question it. It's
Don't
like that
question it
that
because
came for a reason.
right, exactly. And then it's like building a muscle, right? Like we start on
Mhm.
these really, really small things. And then as we build this relationship and we build a sense of trust, because that's the other thing, right? When we've been taught that everything is outside of us, we've never been taught how to trust ourselves.
Mhm.
And to trust that intuitive voice. And so starting with the really, really tiny things and then working our way up, to the bigger questions. And sometimes like I have clients who ask themselves the bigger questions and they'll come back with the answer and they're like, but I'm questioning it. I'm analyzing it. This doesn't
Right.
make sense. That doesn't make sense.
Mhm.
And I will say, nothing on my journey of reinvention actually made sense. Like half the
Mhm.
time I was like, okay, I'm doing this, but I have no clue what I'm doing.
Mhm.
Like, what the hell? Right.
Mhm.
And then it led me somewhere. Right.
Mhm.
And over time, I've been able to kind of trust that intuitive voice where there's times where I'm like, okay, okay, if you want me
Mhm.
to do this, I'm doing it. I don't know why,
Right.
but I'm
Yes.
doing it. Right.
Yep.
But we have to start small. Like, we're very, as human beings, we're very all or nothing. I'm either doing it 100% or I'm not doing it at all. And
Mhm.
no change ever happened in that way. It's about
Right.
building small incremental steps, one at a time, that leads us
Mhm.
to that place. So start with the really tiny decisions and honor
Mhm.
those. And
Mhm.
then, the more you honor it, the more you can hear it, the more it starts to
Mhm.
speak to you. But when you're ignoring it, it'll eventually
Mhm.
just go away.
Yeah, and the beauty of it is that you can course correct, right?
Yeah.
If you decide you don't like it, if you're like, okay, I've got what I needed from this, now I'm gonna pivot. That's the beauty of it, and I think that that's the beauty of being able to reinvent ourselves, is that we always have the option of, you know what, I'm gonna change now, and I'm gonna do
Yeah.
something a little bit different, and now I have this new interest, and being able to change as you please. So that's what I love
Yeah.
about this stage in our life as well, that we have a little bit more freedom to be able to do those things also.
Yeah. And the other thing I talk about a lot is visualization. Like I am such a
Mhm.
huge
Love it.
proponent of like we forgot how to dream. When we were kids, we
Mhm.
daydreamed all the time. Like,
And we
what was
had
our
big
house gonna
dreams.
look like? Yeah. What's our house gonna look like? Who are we gonna marry? How
Mhm.
many kids are gonna have, right? And then somewhere along the way, somebody said, get back to work, and we
Mhm.
we disconnected from our dreams.
Mhm.
And this is where we come back to, right? Create a visualization of what your perfect day would look like, what your perfect hour would look like,
Mhm.
and play with it, dance with it. If there's a desire that you've had, that that thing that pops up and you immediately shut it down by throwing up 10 reasons why it can't happen
Mhm.
on top of it, just hold back on those 10 reasons why it can't happen and
Mhm.
just play with it a little bit, give it some
Mhm.
space, allow it to kind of grow, right?
Mhm.
Because there is always possibility. Like we shut it down with our analytical mind, and what we can't see the possibilities that could get us there,
Mhm.
right? And
Yeah.
so if we allow ourselves to dance and to play and to daydream a little, to visualize, you would be amazed at where that can take us.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. And taking one step at a time,
Yeah,
just like taking one little step at a time, being present with that one step, and then that will lead to the next inspired action.
exactly.
So love that. So tell me, how do people work with you? Like tell me about this community you talked about.
Yeah. So the Old Chicks No Shit community, well, you can access it in a number of different ways. So we have an Instagram following. There is a private Facebook group, obviously a Facebook page.
Mhm.
I run workshops. I do kind of bespoke one-on-one coaching, kind of with
Mhm.
high achieving women.
Mhm.
Um, and I'm going to be launching in the fall a community of women who are actively in the process of building something new for their life and who
Ooh,
want accountability, support of like-minded women all on the same journey. Because
awesome.
one of the things that I hear a lot, and I know this was very true for me, is that it's very lonely. Like I kept
Mhm.
looking around at everybody going, how come everybody else seems to be just like going about their business and their lives are all, but I'm over here like trying to figure out
Mhm.
how to start
Mhm.
over.
Mhm.
And what I realized was, is like, when we find the people who are in the same boat with us and that we can commiserate with, there are people who can hold our belief on the days that we're struggling with it, who can give us a kick in the pants when we need it, but we're
Mhm.
all on the same journey together.
Mhm.
Um, there's so much
Absolutely.
power in a community of
Mhm.
like-minded midlife women.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that in groups, the energy, like expands the intentions even more. And that's what I love about working with groups that
Yeah.
where we're all working towards like the same, we're in the same boat, we're all
Yeah.
working towards the same type of goals. So
Yeah,
awesome.
and one
I
of the
love
things
that.
that I've just started doing is dinner events called Wine, Women, and Midlife Wisdom. And it's
Mm,
about getting, an intimate group of women, so 10, 12 women around a table, and to talk
nice.
about like all of these topics that we don't talk
I
about, to open the
love that.
conversation.
Like live
Um,
events in person.
yeah, yeah,
I
in
love
person.
that.
So you can check the website and there will be
Oh, I
a
will.
list
I'm
of
going to
those
link
events.
all of this in the show notes. And also, I see that you're going to have a free gift, 5 ways to create your kick-ass next chapter.
Yeah.
So we will link that in the show notes as well. Any last words of advice for our listeners who are mostly women approaching or in midlife?
You know, the one thing I say, and I remind myself of, no matter where you are starting from, no matter what it is that you can dream, it is never too late and you are never too old.
Yes.
I interview women on the podcast who, one of my last guests was a 75-year-old woman on her third business. And I'm
Love
like,
it.
she inspires me so much,
Hmm.
but it's never, ever, ever too late. Never
Hmm.
to start
Awesome. I
taking those
love that.
steps towards, yeah,
Very,
midlife.
very great message. Well, thank you so much for being here. And then there's one more question I like to ask all my guests. If you could share something you're loving right now, whether it's a product or a book or an app, like something that you're obsessing over like these last week or so, like something you're just loving. It could be your glasses, which your glasses are awesome, by the way.
Thank you. So are yours.
Thanks.
What am I obsessing over this week? Um, what I'm obsessing over this week is the new social media platform Threads, to be honest.
Oh, really? You're loving it, huh?
And interestingly, I really didn't think I was going to, but I've made so many amazing connections, just like not based on business things, but just on thoughts
Yes.
and ideas.
Yes.
And it feels like very like one of my big values is connection and collaboration.
Yeah.
And being able to find like-minded people on
Hmm.
all topics of all kinds of things. I feel like people feel very free to just share random thoughts.
Hmm.
And
Okay,
those random
cool.
thoughts are such
Hmm.
cool opportunities for connection.
Yes.
And
Okay.
so I've actually been loving that.
I heard somebody else say that on a podcast yesterday. So I think this is my sign.
This is
I
your
need to get
sign.
on it today
Make
and
sure
I'll
you
look
follow
for
me
you
and I
there.
will follow
Yes,
you back.
I will look for you there. Well, Jennifer, thank you so much for being here. I love, this is what I love about bringing, giving us voices and sharing this with other women. I think that like I encounter so many friends and women that are like, oh, it's what for? I would have loved to have done that, but what for now? It's too late. And I'm like, girl, you're not even 50 yet. Like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
So I love the idea of empowering women, especially in my community, in the Latina community, where we were grown up, raised to like serve everybody else, and just be happy with what you have. So these conversations are really important to me and really powerful to our community. So
Mhm.
thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. I really enjoyed our conversation.
So did I. All right. I hope you enjoyed today's conversation with Jennifer. As you can see, she and I have very similar beliefs. And I think that many of us probably reach this age. And if we are hit hard enough in the head and drop to our knees, we will actually start to listen to that intuition and that voice inside and reach this point of, hold up, wait a minute, we're not done yet. Like we still have so much more life ahead of us. And that was the case with both Jennifer and I. And now we're both on this path of empowering other women to do the same for themselves. So I hope you joined this conversation and you come to realize that there truly is so much more life ahead of us, and we have the power within to do amazing things. And and there are people out there supporting us, and there are places where we can meet other women like us who want to create a next chapter in our book. So join us. All the links to all the resources mentioned, to all her website and podcast and her Instagram are in the show notes. And thank you so much for being here. Share this with other women so we all together can jump on this bandwagon and create our best life yet in midlife and beyond. Thank you so much for being here. Hasta la próxima.